Okay, welcome to the post-assessment. I was able to observe Julie Anderson. Julie teaches second grade here at Boyden Hall. And I got to see math. Can you tell me a little bit about the lesson?
We were working on counting money, and so I used guided math during my math time, and I met with two groups at the table here. One of the groups was probably my above level group, and so they worked on counting change. I gave them a money amount and they counted change up to $1 or up to 50 cents. And then the other group was probably my intervention group, the ones that were struggling a little more, and they just worked on counting different amounts of coins, probably up to about $1, I think. So, yep, they just need lots of practice counting, looking at the money and counting on.
I noticed at one point during your upper group that they wanted to be challenged even more. They wanted to use 50-cent pieces because they wanted to go to $5.
Sure.
And they wanted to use the fewest coins possible. So you went with that and you challenged them. And what went into that decision making?
You know, that group is definitely, they are my high flyers, and they are always looking for more ways to be able and different ways to do things. Sometimes I do say, nope, I'm the teacher and I decide. But in this case, yes, that was a good way for them to be able to use their skills in a way that they were thinking ahead. Oh, I could do this instead of the way that I was asking them to do it. So just to give them a little bit more of a challenge and keep pushing them to go further.
I also noticed that you said, okay, let's pretend we're at the gas station.
Sure.
Would you ever receive a 50-cent piece? And then you had quite a discussion over why it's used, why
we
it's
wouldn't
not.
use 50-cent pieces much, because they're so large. Dad isn't going to want to carry them in his pocket. Mom isn't going to have room for them in their purse, so we just don't use them very much. But you could, because it is viable money. So
it was fun to see them being so engaged. One of the things that Boyden Hall has as a goal, according to Mr. Kerr, is student engagement. He said he will always ask for and observe student engagement. So what did you think about the student engagement that day?
I thought it was great. They were in the top group. They were all very much engaged in what they were doing. And I think in the intervention group too, it maybe took a little longer to get around to everybody and listen to them count their coins, make sure they all had it. But I feel like with the guided math that everybody is engaged in what they're doing. And I like that with the smaller group, to be able to see more one-on-one what they're doing.
Did you choose guided math because this is a new plan for you?
This is a new plan for me too. I had talked to some other teachers who used guided math, and in the past I've just used our math curriculum, which was a math book. I would teach a lesson to the whole class, where you very often would lose some kids that weren't following along, and I talked to teachers who had a lot of success with the guided math. For one reason, that you do meet one-on-one with the kids at the table, but then when they're not at the table, they're being more independent and working on their own at their seats or around the room in various activities that they're doing.
How do you have to set up the room so that they can be engaged all of the time? I noticed that you went through the scoot directions and they seem to know what to do. Does it teach? Do you have to teach them the routine?
Oh, yes. At the beginning of the year, we spent a lot of time. We've got spinets that are individual activities, too. So we spent time just practicing how to do a spinet, or practicing how to do, another independent activity, how to do what they do when they do a paper and where they turn it in, or, all of those routines, yes, are definitely practiced at the beginning of the year, so that then they are more independent and you don't have to go over those directions all the time.
Clearly, in April, they knew what they were doing.
Yes, I hope so.
Did your students learn what you wanted them to learn? Are you happy with their achievement?
I am. There are a few that are still struggling with counting coins, and I think they will until that's one of those skills, I think, that the light bulb turns on later on and they figure out how to do it. But I think for the most part, when I did do the end of the unit assessment, most of them did very well. There were just a couple that were really struggling yet with how to count coins and count money. So
I noticed one of the things you did is with your intervention group, you said, let's pretend we're at morning meeting. So we're going to count by tens.
Sure.
What does that look like?
Right.
Yeah, we're going to start at 50. Now we're going to count by tens. What does that look like?
Yeah.
So you were kind of making that tie-in.
Right, helping them to relate to some other thing that we do that would help them with that, yes. Counting dimes, counting by tens, counting nickels, counting by fives.
Because they already knew how to do that.
Right,
so you were
we
just
practice
trying
that
to,
almost every day in the morning. So.
You were trying to bridge that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Here, this one we already talked about. Did I alter my goals or instructional plan during the lesson?
That I think I do almost every day. Kind of flexibility, kind of go with the flow. If they look like they need more practice on something, then we do more practice, and I'll carry on the next day if I didn't get as far as I wanted, or to change the plan to jump ahead if that's what looks like we can manage. So,
Yeah, I saw that happen. If you had the opportunity to teach this lesson again to the same group of students, is there anything you'd do differently?
oh, that's always hard. Not necessarily. You know, I think when they get that practice, and I liked that the upper group, the above level group, was trying to challenge themselves. I appreciate that. So, no, I think, you know, just kind of going with the flow and, yeah.
You feel like this was a good switch for your whole year?
Oh, yes, definitely.
You'll do it again next year.
Oh, yes, yeah. This is the second year I've used the program. So it's even easier, better this year, I feel like, than last year when it was the first year going through it. But, yeah.
Oh, good. Iowa teaching standards that were related to the lesson?
Just looking at them here, I think always the performance data, always kind of monitoring, keeping data, even accepting responsibility, you know, the kids accepting the responsibility for a good classroom atmosphere and them doing their part on that. And yeah, there's lots of them that it could fit into. Implementing strategies that they can continue to use as they go forward. Sure.
I think, definitely assessment methods too. I noticed you were taking formative assessment because they were erasing their things because they were using the markers. So you were making sure that they knew what they were doing.
Right. I guess in my mind I'm always assessing what they're doing, and then sometimes I'll go back and, you know, jot down some notes about maybe who needs extra practice and make sure that I spend some extra time with them, whether it's fixing mistakes that they've made on their assignments or fixing mistakes that they've made and going over that kind of thing, or just doing some extra practice with them to make sure that they get some extra practice with it. Yeah.
So, you know, that's a mature teaching experience. My students don't do that. They don't. They're
You'll
so
learn from experience.
They do, because they're so worried about what their performance is that it's hard. They're teaching, but they're teaching their subject and not teaching the children.
Oh, exactly. And I find that with student teachers I've worked with, that's very evident, that you don't know the subject material as well, so you're more concerned about what am I supposed to be teaching rather than being observant of the students and how they're acting and how they're responding to you.
And what they're supposed to
and
be
what
learning.
they're supposed to be learning, exactly.
It's a switch, so it's fun to talk to you about
Definitely.
this. I'm going to move to the ORID things, which
Okay.
is the style that I've chosen to focus on.
Sure.
So what do you think the students accomplished during the lesson?
Oh, I think just becoming more comfortable with money. Just being able, that's such an important life skill that trying to impress on them that when they do go out and use money in a store, are you going to know that you get the right amount of change? Are you going to check that, or are you just going to accept what the teller or the clerk gives you back? You know, so to get them to think about how they're going to use it in their coming life as they use money.
I noticed you brought them into kind of an ethical dilemma there. at the end when you said if they gave you too much change, would
Oh,
you give
yes.
it back?
Yes.
They didn't give you enough. Would you ask
Would
for
you
that?
ask for it? Right.
We had some of your students that went over their heads, but
Oh, yes.
a few of them
Right.
were
Thinking about it.
yeah.
Right.
Oh.
Right. What would I do? What would be the right thing to do?
right.
Yeah.
They were saying they'd go ask if they didn't get enough, but then as soon as you said, "What if they gave you too
Too
much?"
much. Oh. Some of them would definitely give it back.
They
but
would.
Not all of them, probably.
That was funny. Okay, so what kind of resources do you need to teach math in this way?
This curriculum has the spinets, which I have printed off and laminated, and that's very simple. For most of them just have a paper clip and as a spinner, and they go from there. A lot of manipulatives. The coins, I have them use real money. I just bring some change from home, and we have little boxes that we keep it in here, and then when they're done, they'll give the box back to me. But I like them to use real coins instead of the plastic. But for all of the different parts that we've done, tens and ones blocks, or fraction pieces, or clocks, we're doing that now, just to have them have something that they work with and manipulate so that it gets to their brain
Okay.
in a more
So
concrete.
did you have to gather that, or is
Some of it is here, the tens and ones. Some of it I look through my curriculum every year at the end of the year and requisition things that I think as I go through the year, I wish I had that. And then, it's usually approved as if it's not something huge, like the coins I just brought from home. But
did you give up the textbook, or you're using this too?
No, I gave up the textbook. Last year we did have it also, but it was a consumable, so it was like a huge waste of money because we did not use it. I feel like this is pretty all-inclusive. They've got student work. They have a math journal that includes story problems so that they work on story problems and the critical thinking that way. So right now I'm just using this,
And at the end of the year last year, you had to decide if your students had done well and then make a decision.
And then make a decision. Yep, looked at test scores and how I felt that they had done. So
You usually know that. So, did you have any behaviors that day? I didn't see anything, but do you have, just as a transition here, do you feel like you needed to teach kids a different way to interact with materials and methods?
Yeah. I guess just the focusing aspect. That's why I like the small group, because there are several, and there are in every class in every year now, that have the attention issues, the focusing issues. And so I feel like when I get them here at the table with 5 or 6 kids sitting there, I can really redirect them a lot easier because I'm in proximity to them.
I noticed you were touching this little guy. There's a little guy here while you were teaching her.
Oh,
So,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
You were just
Come
focusing.
back.
Come back,
Yeah.
come back, come back, come back.
Yes.
That's,
And there are lots of them that need that. Yeah.
So, was this part of your professional development plan? Do you have an opportunity to create that? So moving to this new kind of
I think I did put that in my professional development plan this year to work more on developing the math, the guided math, right?
Good.
And to put it as a focus for
Because
my
it's
year.
something new. As you reflect on standards and criteria for math, what pleases you or what concerns you about, for sure for this lesson, but for the math in particular?
This lesson, I think, is good. I think that this curriculum is all standards-based, which is very good. Then at least I know that what I'm doing does relate back to the standards. Overall, I guess my main issue, and it's me as a teacher, it's not the standards, is just to time everything so that I can get through everything in a year's time. Like now we're at the end of the year, and there are a couple topics that I haven't really touched on. I mean, incidentally, we've touched on them, but not to really study them in math time. So it's always kind of a time thing with...
You'd always like another month.
Oh, yes, at least.
What is one thing in the lesson that you felt was most important, or most effective, let's say?
I think just the one-on-one time that I get with them in the small group.
Mm-hmm.
I like that the most, that I can really hone in on, can you count the coins? Have you do it individually, and it's not like trying to get the whole class to do it all at once, but it's more, even though I have 6 kids at the table, it's just way more individual attention than trying to teach a lesson to the whole class.
Do you just
So-
have 2 groups, or
This year I can do that because I've got 15 students total. One is in SC, one is in the resource room for all of his reading and math, and the other one goes for supplemental. So then I'm down to 12 kids. So I started the year trying to do 3 groups, but only having to do 2, then I have more time to spend with each of the
Yeah.
groups instead of trying to rush through 3 groups. But in a bigger class, I would have 3 groups. Yeah.
So now it's the now what? What things will you do differently next time you teach this lesson, or even next time you teach in this way? You already said you'd move to a 3 group.
Right, 3 groups. And then I think just looking at the scope and sequence and how much time I should spend on each unit instead of maybe trying to get through all the lessons, trying to pick and choose so that I make it through the curriculum. This lesson in particular, I think just giving them, especially that below level group, lots of practice in as many different ways as I can to count the coins. And we do implement that in our calendar activities every morning. We count money. But yeah, for some of them it just doesn't sink in. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Is there anything that the school could do to help you with any of the scope and sequence, or what kinds of supports would you like with your goals?
I could probably meet with like the instructional coach to go over the scope and sequence and how much time I have to spend on everything. Yeah, that would probably be the main.
So if I were your
thing.
principal, I would make that happen.
Okay.
All right.